Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to Open Studio with Kim Jorgensen Gane. This is my series, episode 4, I believe, of my series Triggered by Trumpism, wherein I ask the question, what have you started that's badass? And I'm super excited about today's guest. I will welcome Oren Jacobson with Men4Choice. It is an organization that he started in the Chicago area, and I share so much of what they post. It is always good stuff, and it is always it is a boon to my soul to see men advocating for reproductive justice. So I'm gonna, without any further ado, I'm gonna bring Oren in. And there he is.
Hi there.
This is so exciting when this works. Hello and welcome, and thank you so much. You and I have talked on the phone once.
Yes.
Probably, what, a year and a half ago or so?
You know, and I even remember where I was during that conversation.
Really? I was in my car. That's all I remember. I don't remember.
I was outside a post office in Elmhurst, Illinois.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I'm flattered that you remember that.
How are you doing?
I'm
Besides the obvious, or including the obvious?
Say that again. I'm sorry. I was
How are you doing besides the obvious or including the obvious?
Oh my goodness. Well, so I'm very fortunate, obviously. My husband's work is essential, and so he continues to be employed. It's great that he actually gets to spend time at home now. I wasn't sure he liked me. He travels a lot generally for his work. So it's nice to have him home. It's getting a little long. I live with 3 men, you know, and here I am talking to one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
They're wonderful. Really, they are. And I feel very, very fortunate right now. But I have a lot of PTSD from, I was a single mom I raised my daughter alone for the first 6 years of her life with no child support. So, the minute kids were out of school, but parents were still working, my brain is spinning and I'm thinking, what are single moms doing right now? Who hadn't budgeted for daycare, who may not have access to daycare, who don't have access perhaps to grandparents, or, my mind was spinning at that point. And then you add on top of it, we closed a restaurant after 9/11. So I'm envisioning, all the tipped workers and all the restaurant owners who put their blood, sweat, and tears into their, their hearts, into their businesses. And so how about you?
We're okay. So my wife is an emergency room doctor.
I did not realize that.
She is literally on shift right now.
Oh my gosh.
So, it's been quite an experience from that perspective.
And the Chicago area is getting hit pretty hard. Is she downtown?
She's in a suburb called Arlington Heights, but actually the hospital that she is at was the hospital with the first recorded COVID case in the county.
Oh, wow.
So I remember her coming upstairs on a Saturday evening saying, "You can't tell anybody. I just got an email. We've got a case."
Wow.
And I think on Monday morning, 2 days later, about 36 hours later, they released they released the information publicly. So it's been very stressful. She's an incredibly strong person. I've always, when my wife and I were about dating for about 6 months, she asked me what it was that I liked about her. And one of the things that I said was that she was really steady. And she took that as an insult because steady doesn't sound sexy. It doesn't sound beautiful. It's just sort of like, but I genuinely admired, and she was in residency at that point in time in Cook County Stroger Hospital, working 60, 70 hours a week, sometimes doing weeks where she was doing 24 on, 24 off in trauma center.
Wow.
And I marveled at how she handled it all. So I thought it was a massive compliment. she didn't quite love it, but she's a very strong person. And, you know, all things considered, has handled this incredibly well, but it's impossible to be doing what she's doing, which involves, you know, putting a tube down people's throat every single day.
Right.
You know, who are either known to be positive or are likely positive. You know, that's going to cause some anxiety and some fear. And, you know, we've had to have conversations about the what ifs and how we would handle medical care for her if something happened, and for me if I got it from her. And so fortunately everybody is okay, you know, because she's a doctor and she's therefore essential. We don't have to deal with the economic side of this challenge. All of my work has continued and only escalated because of it.
Sure.
Men4Choice is fortunately in a decent enough position that we can continue to do our work, although very differently. And so, you know, anxiety for us, but certainly plenty of friends who are in very different situations, restaurant owners, other family members who, you know, aren't in the same situation economically. And, you know, so try to carry all that together, but all in all.
Yeah, kind of feeling the weight of the world right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, thank you for your wife, for her service. And I thank my husband is a former firefighter, paramedic, police officer. And, you know, so he's intubated a lot of people. He's delivered 17 babies. I mean, you know, bodily fluids and all those things.
Right.
So that was before Kim, though. BK, we call that. So, and I'm thankful for that. You know, I have a little brother who's a cop in Cleveland. I think about, you know, there was a woman police. Oh, that'll probably happen at my. I have two.
There'll be more of that. That's right.
Yeah, that's okay. This is our new world, right? Our new reality.
Exactly.
Anyways, I have a tangential, you know, understanding of, just from his stories, of what the field feels like, and she's very much on the front lines. And just wow, what do you do in your real job, if you have a job other than Men4Choice?
Yeah. So I work I work for myself. I've worked for myself for the last 5 years as sort of, you know, an independent contractor and consultant, working on a bunch of different projects. One is a for-profit company that's in real estate, and I've been helping to lead their COVID-19 task force. I'm really proud of the work that organization has done, and so far has not laid off anybody. And the CEO has made it his charge to try to keep everybody employed through this. And so they've really sort of been bold in that. And then all my other clients are nonprofit clients who are all in sort of civic advocacy spaces. So, you know, Men4Choice originated as a pure passion project. Everybody involved for the first 3.5, almost 4 years, was doing the work completely pro bono.
Wow.
For a whole set of reasons. And in the last 14 months, we've started to compensate folks for their time. First, the women, in particular women of color, who work in various ways for the organization. And then later, as we had more resources, myself and another one of the co-founders came on. And so there are 5 of us now, and sort of this part-time, small, nimble staff that are paid a little bit every single month, trying to do this really interesting, innovative, and, like, most importantly, critical work of trying to get male identifying folk off the sidelines and into the fight.
While hearing women's voices. And yeah,
for sure. I mean, that's the anybody who's done allyship work and done it in, like, a really serious way, and even for those who haven't done it in a serious way, you eventually realize that there is a right way and a wrong way, and you will be corrected for the wrong way.
You have any stories?
and we're not immune to that, but we've also been very intentional over the last 5 years of, when we've known that there were critiques and criticisms, we haven't been defensive, we haven't run away from them. Everybody who I've ever known who has elevated a concern to me, I have gone to meet with, to ask questions, to understand. We've constantly tweaked the way that we've built our organization. The 501c3 and the 501c4 are both mixed gendered and mixed race, very diverse, mixed identity and orientation boards. They're both chaired by women, in particular women of color. We have plenty of folks who come from impacted communities who are in senior roles, either on the boards or in the communities, that are really serving as both leaders and guides. Mm-hmm. And so we have this balance, which is sort of, how do we honor what the movement needs, and center the voices of those most impacted, while also meeting the target audience, to use a sort of businessy framework on it, where they are.
Right.
And where we've landed with that is, rule number one is do no harm.
Right.
Try to say nothing that runs counter to what the movement is trying to do, both in terms of policy and, more importantly, perhaps in terms of culture, because policy follows culture. And then number two is meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And so that requires us to build a level of trust and relationship with our partners. At this point, I think we have 19 official partners from across the country, that demonstrates that we are serious about taking their input and serious about creating content for our members and those who engage with us digitally that stays in line with their priorities. Mm-hmm. Maybe says it in a way that the average guy can get.
What's kind of the biggest pushback, I guess, resistance that you get from men when you invite them into this work?
So we have the entire organization is built on 4 hypotheses of why men don't engage. And we've had them from the beginning, and we've literally run the organization trying to prove that they're true. And I think to some extent we've been able to do that, both qualitatively and quantitatively. And it's just the assumptions are as follows. Number one, most men don't actually know what harm is being created.
I agree. They
understand the idea of abortion. They know what it means to be pro-choice on the surface. They tend to have mostly supportive, though potentially nuanced views. And I mean nuanced in not like a very detailed way so much as like they've heard the myths, mm-hmm. and they hear the 20-week thing, and they get like, they're like, oh, that's a logical place to stop. And so they don't really know what it is that they're advocating for. But they have no idea what's actually the outcome of the policy that is restricting access.
Right.
So central to activating is, can you get the harm in front of them? And there's a piece of us, socially socialized in our DNA that is paternalistic and protective in nature.
Yeah.
And so what's that?
Excuse me, and patriarchal.
And patriarchal, for sure. And what we try to do is we want to tap into that righteous anger and desire to protect our people, and then guide it in a way that doesn't recreate the patriarchal framework, but still allows us to be us. We want to be protectors. And we can be protectors.
You. My husband would love you.
Yeah. Like we want to be protectors, and that's like that's not a bad thing. That's not the all of us have that piece to us.
Right.
Right. And that's not the cultural issue we need to fix.
Right.
It needs to be guided. So that's number one. Number two, they see this as a gendered issue. They see it as a woman's issue. It only impacts women. It is your issue. And so what most men do is they come to a very simple point. They're like, do I believe in abortion? Or do I believe that I should tell a woman what to do? And we mostly stop at the water's edge, so to speak, to use a foreign policy idea, right?
Right.
Partisanship stops at the water's edge, in theory. And so most of us stop there. And then we say, you got this. Good luck.
Right.
And so we have to reframe, and I'll get into what that looks like in a minute if you want to. We have to reframe that and move them away from the notion that is gendered and move them away from the idea that this isn't their issue too. So that's 1 and 2. Number 3 is they don't see a natural place to enter the movement. And that's in part because, like there are traditional gendered norms, and pink and purple aren't naturally our colors. But it's also in part because guys tend to socialize and hang out and go to places that other guys are.
Right.
And the events that sort of serve as funnels into this work are never tailored to what men like to do.
Sure.
Right? So if you go to the average event, that is usually where people start to become engaged and activated. There are men there. Those men are almost always someone's partner. Right.
And probably feeling pretty awkward.
and maybe huddled in the corner with the other guys talking about something else. So that's the third. And then the fourth thing is we don't have a playbook. We don't know what to say and what to do. And while we are more than willing to talk at length about things we don't know, but we think we know, we are not very willing to talk about things we know we don't know, especially when it comes to an issue that's tied to sex, sexuality, anatomy, the discomfort of abortion. Like we're good at talking to our buddies at a bar about our sexual conquest. We're not good at talking about this. Really? We're not likely to step into a space where, absent the baseline knowledge to have a conversation about this, we're going to look like fools.
Yeah.
So those 4 things. So our entire organization is set up to put the harm in front of people, reframe and create ownership, provide a space for them to enter with their peers comfortably so that we can then funnel them to work with partners who are really leading on the ground, and then give them a playbook for how to do it, what to say, and how to engage so that they can do it in a way where they don't have to feel, silly or dumb or risk being smacked, so to speak.
Sure. I get that. It mystifies me. I guess the older I get and the more I understand the economy of reproductive justice, economic justice, racial justice, how all those things are so inextricably tied together. It astounds me that men with wives and girlfriends and sisters and mothers and, that they accept the economic implications of women not being able to determine for themselves when and whether to have children.
Right.
Because we barely exist economically. So, and then, to me, it is inextricably linked with the disappearance of the middle class. The fact that women are not recognized economically, and that we, our earning years are so limited. Our families make such sacrifices when we make choices like being stay-at-home moms, because there's no economic value tied to that. There's no income tied to that. That's why we have pay equity issues, and why they persist throughout our lives.
Right. And not to mention the intersection of the full range of reproductive health care, which also includes creating a way for you as a new mother to stay at home without economic pain, to create the bond and take care of your family for the time period that is right, let alone raise your children in safe communities with clean air, clean water, nutrition, good schools, etc.
Yeah. So tell me about the reframing then.
Yeah. So there's two critical issues that we think need to be dealt with. One is just shifting the gendered lens, and the second is creating ownership. So I'll start with the shift. The shift is this, that the issue is not just about abortion, it's about freedom and it's about control.
Mm-hmm.
Can a person be free who does not control their own body, their own health care, and their own reproductive decisions? And I know you know the answer to this question.
Right.
But the question is usually not posed to a man.
Right.
So we have to pose that question to the man after the harm has been identified.
Mm-hmm.
And we spend time there. And usually that is a conversation that is led by somebody impacted as opposed to someone like me.
Mm-hmm.
But we ask that question plainly. And we ask people to answer the question simply, yes or no.
Yeah.
Everybody in these conversations will get to the same place. And to be clear, our focus is on activating passive male allies. This isn't about conversion. There are 60 million men who identify as pro-choice, according to Pew's research. We're not worried about the rest of them. We're just trying to get more of the guys who are already in theory with us to make this their issue.
Yeah.
So we frame this around freedom and control and whether or not a person can be free if they don't control.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you reach that conclusion, there's a couple like natural next steps, right? That means that you don't have freedom and you don't have control. And those are two ideas that are central to our identity of what it means to be an American in the first place.
Right.
Or individual liberty broadly beyond a national scope.
Yeah.
The final piece of that first step is recognizing the fact that we have an obligation as allies who have that freedom to be actively engaged in expanding that freedom, and that the story of America is the story of marginalized communities, disproportionately harmed, fighting for the expansion of rights and freedoms, and the battle to get those who are not part of those communities to recognize their basic humanity.
Yeah.
So that's piece one.
Mm.
Piece two is an ownership piece, which I think is just as important and frankly is newer in our evolution. This is something that is really within the last 3 or 4 months. And I'll give the piece and then I'll tell the story behind how it came to me. And I've had a chance to sort of vet this out with some of the folks who do the polling and the focus grouping to make sure that like they felt like we were going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
When the government robs you of your right to bodily autonomy, robs you of your right to choose, robs you of the right to determine whether or if to become a parent and when to do so, they are also robbing me of that same right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't deserve any more than 49% of the say in any conversation. It's still my wife's decision at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But the government is dictating to me what I can do with my wife for the best interests of my family.
Mm-hmm.
They are taking away my freedom to decide how to build my family with my partner, how to live our life with my partner. Right. That freedom and that right is taken from me too.
Yeah.
And every male identifying ally who has a partner in particular or will have a partner or is just engaging in, single life,
right?
Their right is being robbed from them as well. The difference is in reality that it's easier for men to detach from that obligation than it is for a person who can get pregnant. Mm-hmm. But it's critical that all of us recognize, that men recognize that the government is taking control of our lives out of our hands by dictating to us what our partners can decide and what we can decide for our families and in what is in our best interests.
Right.
That is, I think, beyond imperative that more men hear and get. because it is factually true. To your point earlier about how men don't understand the economic impact, right, and let alone the economic impact from like an esoteric view, but like the way their family's economic futures are impacted adversely when they don't have the choice about whether or not to have a child, especially because, as you know, right, the majority of those who seek abortion already have children, and most of those who identify a reason to get abortion do so because they are concerned about the economic well-being of their family and their ability to take care of another child.
Right.
So that's really critical. And the aha moment for me, which is really strange, 5 years into doing this work to finally get this, because I can tell you before it didn't click in this way. And most of what we were talking about was purely about obligations and not about ownership. I woke up one morning to a text message from a friend, conservative-leaning guy who just sent money to Congressman Dan Lipinski and told me about it mostly to taunt me. And I don't think he was trying to be a jerk. I think he was just trying to be a typical dude.
Right.
And, meanwhile, Men4Choice advocacy put up some billboards around the state of Illinois attacking him, which is what I think got this text to me. And I ended up through the conversation over text asking him a question. My question was this. Let's say my wife and I are trying to get pregnant. And let's say we do. Mm-hmm. And then let's say one of our parents, fortunately, all of our parents are still with us. Both of our fathers are in their late or mid, are past 75. They both have, conditions and that are come with age, although they're both healthy and sharp. But let's just say one of our parents gets diagnosed with a serious illness. Mm-hmm. And Betsy and I have to look at each other after trying and wanting a child and ask whether or not we have the capacity right now to support our family the way we need to, and to continue the pregnancy. And I said, would you actively work to rob me of the freedom to make the decision that my wife and I think are in our best interest for our entire family in that moment? And he said, yes. He said, I believe this and this. The only exceptions for me are rape, murder, incest, health of the mother. And I would give money to politicians and vote for politicians to pursue those policies. My response to that person was, you're not a friend. I like you. We can be friendly, but I'm not going to call you my friend anymore, because no friend of mine would actively work to create harm and rob me of the right to make that decision simply because you believe your opinion should be forced upon my life.
Yeah.
When my decision has no impact whatsoever on yours.
Right.
None.
Right.
None. Unless you believe somehow that God is punishing us with a plague for the sin of abortion.
Which there are plenty of people who do, but I don't know people.
I'm going to guess that he's not.
Yeah.
Or she or it is not. But I digress.
Yeah. So tell me, kind of lead me down the road of how you came to make this your issue and care about this issue, and kind of like the roots of how you.
So the irony is, I don't have any life experience tied to this. I'm not aware of any partner I've ever had, anyone in my family who has had to pursue an abortion or has been denied access to reproductive health care. Usually, people who look like me don't have the latter issue.
Exactly.
I was sitting in the back of the room at a presentation as part of a wonderful progressive organization called New Leaders Council, which is the largest leadership development organization in the progressive movement. And I was listening to a presentation by a fantastic advocate by the name of Andy Friedman, who works nationally in this space. This was 2015. It was in the early part of 2015, probably we're April. So it was maybe March of 2015 or something like that. Obama's president. You think Roe v. Wade is settled law and fine. Right. I'm in Illinois, which is a blue state. And it was like a 7-minute presentation about what had happened since 2010 through that moment. And I just was like, holy shit, this is a thing? And that was literally it.
States.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she walked through how many laws had been passed, how many laws had been presented, what had happened in the time period, the comparison, the impact, the systematic way in which the right was going after these laws, the pain it was causing, the risk to Roe, like all this stuff. And like, literally I was in the back of the room being like, holy shit. I can't believe this is real. And then you start to go through this sort of series. Like that activated that paternalistic anger inside me.
Sure.
Then you go through these like series of like, how did I not know?
Right.
Where have I been?
Right.
And then you get this like this guilt, shame, embarrassment phase of like, I'm in a space that is supposed to be these educated, progressive, civic-minded leaders. I should know this thing. And so then it just sort of became like, when you become aware of a thing, what are your obligations? I don't think I had an obligation to build an organization. And there were points in time at which I thought we did the wrong thing. Today, I don't. I think we did the right thing because we need to have somebody focus specifically on this. You can be a good ally by donating a little money or a little time. I have a little bit of a personal sickness around entrepreneurial endeavors and around creation, and having a few too many policy degrees, including an MBA, and doing consulting work and having private sector work and having done startups. I have this bug where I like to create, and I like to identify a problem and then see if you can create a model and try to fix it and scale. And so most of my civic work ends up being done with organizations that are trying to solve very specific problems and then grow them at scale. So those are the organizations that I end up consulting with. I come in and work with them on strategy and operations to try to help them do that. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking at this from a sort of detached perspective and just said, like, how big is the market? Mm-hmm. And then I looked at like Facebook and I said, how many left-leaning men are in Illinois on Facebook? It was like 2.1 million. Wow. And said, how many men identify or does Facebook code as pro-choice? And it was 80,000.
Really?
So you're talking about 2.1 million men, of which the polling suggests 75% identify as pro-choice, right? Democratic, progressive-leaning men, it's 3 and 4, which is about the same as what you get for women, generally speaking, on the issue. So it's like right in line with there's no gender split. It's really an ideology split on support. So 75% of that audience, like more than 1.5 million people are probably pro-choice. Only 80,000 of them are identified having, so they're following NARAL or Planned Parenthood or Chicago Abortion Fund or yeah. And so my immediate answer is like, holy shit, this is why I don't know anything. It's because all of my news comes from here.
Right.
And if it's not coming through my feed, then I don't know it. If my friends aren't talking about it, then I don't know it.
Right.
And so I started to think about solving that problem, creating a communications channel, both digitally and interpersonally, because at the end of the day, I'm sort of an organizer activist person. Mm-hmm. And so we tried to do these two things at once, which was start to organize on the ground and do education and days of action and canvassing and phone banking and raising money, and at the same time build a social media presence mm-hmm. to create an audience that was more split, in terms of its gender dynamic. Mm-hmm. So we could increase the number of people the number of male allies in particular who were seeing the content.
Yeah.
And so those were like the two legs of the strategy. And then in Illinois in particular, we focused heavily on organizing because the group that we brought in to start the organization were mostly politicos and organizers. Mm-hmm. And at the time, this was late 2015 into 2016, and then especially in 2017, right? Like then you were in an emergency situation.
Yeah.
Right. And so like the thing that we could do to help was to bring more bodies, to knock doors, to raise money, to phone bank. And so in 2017, there was a bill being worked on in Illinois called House Bill 40. Mm-hmm. To this day is one of the few bills that people in Illinois still remember, because it was it was Trump. Roe v. Wade was threatened, and this bill sort of removed trigger language in the law. It dealt with some inequities in terms of access to insurance for women and who worked for the state who couldn't get state-covered insurance for abortion. And most importantly, it expanded Medicaid access for abortion. Mm. We had a Republican governor at the time, a guy named Bruce Rauner. And so, there was capacity constraints for all these organizations.
Sure.
Think about what Planned Parenthood was dealing with in ACLU, to say nothing of these small community-based organizations who have not been particularly well funded. And so we got together with a group of them and said, like, we have this idea. Here's a plan, an organizing model. We'll raise the money for it from men. Mm-hmm. We will help to coordinate it through the networks we have with you all. And let's do a targeted automatic phone banking campaign. It turned into 40 plus phone banks, including as far east as Boston, 75,000 phone calls into 6 districts. And you would think it would be easy to get the bill done, but it wasn't. But we got the bill done. Then the governor threatened to veto. It sat on his desk. So then we hosted 12 days of action with partners, knocked doors, got petitions. We launched the first Illinois version of the Call Bullshit campaign, which is now our big national campaign. Only that time it was mostly targeted at the governor.
I love it.
And we do not deserve any credit for that bill getting done. But we were able to bring more people, more bodies, a bigger platform than would have otherwise had, because we had more allies stepping in. Mm-hmm. And that just expanded the power of the movement. And we were honored to do so. And that really sort of solidified how we were going to engage as an organization and allowed us to keep building out from there. And so as a partner organization only, our strategy is elevate your need. Mm. So as we've traveled to Florida and Georgia and Ohio and continue to work with the coalition in Illinois, our answer to them is always pretty simple. What is it that is most important to you? And what do you need from us? And how do you want us to engage as partners? We'll go do that. Mm. And if that means helping build out digital campaigns because we have some resources to do that, we'll do that. If that means canvassing, we'll do that. If all that means is uplifting your content or funneling volunteers into your actions, we'll do that. And that's sort of how we think about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you have paid memberships? How do you, talk to me a little bit about the difference between the C3 and the C4. Yeah. This took me a really long time to understand. In my work with Planned Parenthood, the clinics are the C3, right. The advocacy and lobbying side, that's C4. So kind of help me.
So the C3 is called Men4Choice Education.
Okay.
Having the C3 enables us to raise grant funding and or tax deductible individual contributions that have to be restricted towards non-political community education endeavors and some limited action around non-electoral legislative advocacy.
Okay.
Or advocacy in general. The C4, which is called Men4Choice Advocacy, we weren't that creative. Wow. Men4Choice Advocacy enables us to raise what political people refer as hard dollars, which can be spent on direct advocacy without limits. Right? It can be community education in nature, but we can specifically come out in favor or against a piece of legislation. and within certain limits can come out in favor or against candidates. Mm-hmm. You have to legally not spend, it varies because the law is not like very clear, but like the average lawyer will say no more than 49% of your spending can be on electoral work in a C4. We're way below that because we don't want to come anywhere near those questions. Mm-hmm. In fact, the Lipinski billboards were the first time the C4s ever actually touched a candidate issue. We also have a state PAC in Illinois, which is small, but allows us to do overt political work on Illinois races in particular. So that's the way the organization is set up. And so, like when we decided to expand our work outside of Illinois, we pursued the C3 and C4 structure, and that allowed us to seek some what I would call like seed funding from grants. And we've been fortunate to have a group of institutional funders so far who have been interested in sort of slowly seeding and testing what we can do, and doing it in a way, and this is part of the intentional way that we've chosen to build our team, that maximizes return on investment and protects resources for the community, because any dollar that they're providing is not going somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So like we're very careful about who we even talk to in the first place. And we're very deliberate about saying any money that you might consider giving to us needs to come above and beyond any other entities or projects you would consider funding, because we will not take any money that is going to take money away from any of the partners doing frontline work or leading. So like you'll get some organizations that focus on like, in particular, culture shifting digital campaigns, who will be interested in the Call Bullshit campaign as an example, or in building the starter kit and the assets around our starter kit. And so what we've all decided, so we have 5 people who are technically on staff. They're independent contractors. At the risk of saying too much, nobody gets paid more than $3,000 a month. In fact, only one person gets paid $3,000 a month, and everybody else gets paid less than $3,000 a month.
What's magic about that number?
The 3. Besides what we can afford to do what we need to do, very little. My point in saying it is like we're being very, very, very careful about our resources, and everybody who's in our team knows and has agreed and has opted in, knowing that they are going to be underpaid their value and their worth for their time. So. The current political director for Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky is one of the co-founders.
Really?
Yeah.
Very cool.
And Ben is a guy who on the open market beyond his work with Jan can command lots of value to consult candidates and causes, right? The co-executive director is a well-respected, well-known national movement organizer who was the original director and head of field organizing for the first Women's March and serves on the board nationally of the Women's March. And she, again, is worth 10 times what she's getting paid.
These people that believe in this work.
Yeah, our partnerships, our national partnerships director is the former. And by the way, the woman's name is Mrinalini Chakraborty. Ben Head is the political director. The National Partnerships Director is a woman named China Dickerson, who's the former Deputy National Political Director for NARAL. She worked with Ready for Hillary. She's worked for Emily's List. And so, those 4 are the senior team. Then we have this great guy out of Florida named Aaron Voss-Lunn, who is a Harvard-educated guy who is our digital organizer. Wow. And so really dynamic people who are committed to the work and know that the only way that we can put this together and get this to what I would call phase 3, which is really to have a responsibly and sustainably funded organization that can have the type of staff and pay the type of money that these people deserve to execute our plan is for all of us to be willing to give well beyond what we can compensate. And that's both a belief in the mission and the cause, but it's also a reflection of the mission and our role, because, as I said before, we feel such an intense obligation to protect and maximize limited resources because we are not on the front lines. We are not those most disproportionately impacted. And so part of how we try to return that investment is both being a support arm for our partners, which includes bringing more people in and bringing in more money. And so, as an example, every year for my birthday, we collectively raise funds for an abortion fund. Last year was Chicago Abortion Fund. This year was the National Network. I think we raised $2,800 last week to support them. We've done online fundraisers for the Clinic Vest Project. We regularly contribute to Emily's List, to Planned Parenthood, again, the Chicago Abortion Fund locally, to various organizations that are working on building up, women running for office. Cause the Effect, which is one in Chicago, and I Will, which is an Illinois development program. And so we are trying to really live our values as far as we can in making sure that we are protecting everybody's resources and delivering as much value to the movement as possible, and stretching every dollar we can.
Yeah. I had last week, I had a friend on, we met through our work as storytellers with Planned Parenthood. Her name is Peshka Calloway, and she started an abortion fund called Holler Justice, Holler Health Justice.
Okay.
And it's very women of color centered, and, she is a woman of color. She's, I forget what she calls herself, Afro-Appalachian or something like that, but which there are not very many people who identify that way.
Yeah, Afro-Appalachian.
Yeah. But she's
like Tiger Woods called himself Cobbler Caucasian at one point.
Right. Right. It's I think people find their own identity, right? And identify, figure out how they identify. But she was talking a lot about the Yellowhammer Fund, for instance, and the National Network of Abortion Funds, and how critical that work is, and how good it feels to further that work. And because of this, just what you're talking about is that it's the right thing.
Right. Right.
And yeah. I just want to mention that Mike Kohler was on. He said, "Whoa, worlds collide. Glad to see you on this, Oren Jacobson. Great conversation. Very impressed with Oren. Great guest. I agree."
Mike Kohler. Oh.
He is. He's working with John Hoadley on John Hoadley's campaign, which John is a super exciting candidate for us to retire.
He's elected now and running for Congress, right?
Yes, he's term limited as a state rep in the Kalamazoo area, and he is running for Congress.
I'm pretty sure I got to meet him and hear him speak at a Victory Fund event with Chasten Buttigieg back in the old world when people could gather.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's neat.
And John is fantastic. He's a super, super exciting candidate. He truly can retire Upton, which Fred Upton, going on 3.5 decades, has been our congressman. Wow. And his impact has been that Democrats have not had a seat at the table in our county. We have, because then the Republican engine has functioned very well with a lot of money locally. And, for a long time here, it was kind of like you were a closet Democrat. So I am kind of late to this work. I started writing about politics, blogging about politics before 2012, before Obama's second term, because I was feeling very much in the middle. We had in Michigan with our friend group in Michigan, we would go camping with, families with kids, our kids' age, and around the fire, I felt like the most liberal person. Then we moved to San Diego, and I felt like the most conservative person in every room, in San Diego. So I started writing about it as feeling very stuck in the middle and, not really frustrated with Obama and Boehner going at each other, so much, and just the division. So it's interesting. When you talk about being active and doing something and engaging men to care, basically, why, to help them understand why they should care. So we have like 10 minutes. How would you, in everything that we've talked about, like, how would you want to leave everyone in our last bit of conversation here?
With hugs and love?
Yeah, well, that. Well, like, how can they?
Yeah.
Critical is how can they get involved?
Yeah. So number one, if you're watching this right now or later, and you identify as someone who is pro-choice and you want to get more involved, first go to men4choice.org, and in particular, download our starter kit. Mm-hmm. It's a great little tool and resource that will give you sort of the 101 of the things you need to know. It will help you understand what does pro-choice really mean? What is reproductive justice? It'll give you all the lingo and the jargon you'll hear people talk about, and give you an understanding of the language, help you understand what's really going on in the landscape, how to answer your buddies, and then outline some next steps. That's number one. And as part of that process, make sure to sign up on our website so you can stay up to date with us. We're gearing up more and more in terms of direct action opportunity through part of this campaign.
Approaches.
The second piece is make sure to follow us on social media. Facebook's our biggest platform. I think we've got about 30,000 followers there, and it's almost a 50-50 gender split. Wow. We are pretty consistent about putting out just general news as well as a whole bunch of other content. I just got done reviewing and approving our content calendar for the next 3 weeks, and there's some stuff in there that is going to be new and different that I'm really excited about, that I hope resonates with our audience pretty well. Batman is featured. Drake is involved.
Oh, I love it.
So we'll see how all that plays out. And then I will tell anybody on here who's watching, if you want to reach out directly to us, you can email us at info@men4choice.org. Everything is men4choice.org. info@men4choice.org. In particular, we are getting ready to launch a series of community conversations, which are designed. It sounds fancier than it is. What we're really going to do is create virtual happy hours for small groups of dudes to drink some whiskey and have a little conversation. It will not be super serious. It will be like a guided, let's talk about this a little bit conversation, but let's also do it sort of in a way that's comfortable and natural for us. 5 to 7 of our buddies, a glass of whiskey, hang out for like 45 minutes, talk a little bit about this, get some information, and move on. So you can, if you'd be interested in joining one, or if you'd be interested in hosting one, and you're willing to get 5 of your buddies, let us know, info@men4choice.org. We're also going to, hopefully in the not too distant future, be announcing a national call with both some partners as well as some influencer figures that I can't name yet, because we're supposed to have some confirmation as early as today, but could be really, really exciting guests to hear from.
Right.
And so we're looking forward to that. And those would be like the most immediate ways. Men4choice.org. Make sure to sign up for our email list. Download the starter kit. There's a Spanish language version of the starter kit that's out now, which I'm really excited about. I was telling the member of our board who helped lead it, I'm like, I love this. I only understand about 30% of what's written, and I only understand the rest of it because I know what's written in the English version. I just love the fact that we have the resource out there. Download the starter kit. Follow us on our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Facebook's the most active for us. And then info@men4choice.org if you'd be down to host a virtual happy hour with some buddies, have some whiskey and conversation about reproductive freedom.
I love that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. It's really exciting that there are, reproductive choice has played such a huge role in my life. Understanding, of course, that choice is a very privileged word, that there are so many people who don't have that choice because they don't have access, they don't have transportation, they don't have funds, they don't have a clinic in their area, and it would require, epic earth-moving, things to get to one, like taking time off of work, like finding childcare for the children they already have. So understanding how, privileged that word is, but how critical it has been in my life, and wanting that for everyone, just to be able to decide for themselves when and whether to have children. And I think, how have you had any movement yet on involving trans men or trans women who, understand that this is important? Yeah. They feel included. Is that
we've had plenty. I shouldn't say plenty. We've had a fair amount of conversations with members of the trans community for a period of time. Last year, we had some trans representation on the board, and because of some challenges in those people's lives, they actually chose, to step away. Though we've kept in communication. One of the real challenges in terms of like organizational representation is the potential feeling of tokenization.
Right.
And so what we've tried to do is maintain conversations and build relationships both with individuals and organizations that advocate on behalf of the community itself, as a way to create a constant feedback loop into our organization so that we are considerate of, the trans community in particular. And so, for example, we're getting ready to run some content that is designed specifically to sort of identify and call out those issues and raise awareness amongst our audience of the fact that that it's not just women.
Right.
Right. If you look at some of the video content we've put out, which you can find at our website, in particular in the Call Bullshit section, you'll find a video that's called There's Someone. And the basic framework is trying to shift the idea away from first my daughter, my sister, etc., and the idea that it's gendered only.
Right.
And just that they are someone.
Yeah.
So in a lot of the work that we do, what we are trying to do is shift the way we are talking about it. So as an example, we put out some talking points at times from male elected officials who are speaking about this, and we've tried to push them away from referencing their children, specifically their daughters, because it still centers you in the conversation, and two, it says only a woman is impacted, and only a woman I care about is my motivation. Right. And trying to get people more to talk about the fact that I am here as an ally because I believe that people who can get pregnant deserve the same freedom that I do.
Yeah.
So that has all been informed through conversations with members of the community as we've gone over time. And we've been, lucky to have relationships with organizations like Equality Illinois and Equality Florida, who, work heavily to advocate, and other organizations. They just happen to be formal partners of ours. And that's how we've really tried to integrate the feedback and make sure that, we bounce from male identifying to men a lot, because at times we have to say men because men are usually the problem as opposed to male identifying allies. But we talk about male allies and use male identifying language because we want to make sure that we're inclusive the whole way.
Sure. I love that. I think that's so important. It's important to recognize that the LGBT community is chronically underemployed. And so again, economically, and we could have a whole nother conversation about toxic masculinity and, all of those factors that that contribute to things like violence against particularly trans. But anyways, that's another day and another conversation. And
one of our board members, a guy named Ali Khalil, you should talk to him about toxic masculinity. He does some really interesting training programs with young high school students in Wisconsin who are overwhelmingly from white rural areas.
Oh, wow.
His stories are really neat. He's really thoughtful about it. In fact, we're developing a new digital webinar series, like a training series, and one of the courses is going to be sort of this intersection of reproductive rights and misogyny.
Oh, that's fantastic, Oren. That's great. Khalil, Khalil.
I got to make sure to spell it right for you. Let me jump on my phone. Tell me.
Go ahead and look that up, and I will.
Khaleel, and you can see him on our board page on the website. And I'm happy to connect you with him, and I'm sure he'd be happy to join you for that conversation.
I would love that very much. So, okay. I'm so tickled to have this conversation with you because I am, in asking this question. So I'll kind of wrap, because we're 1 minute over, I'll kind of wrap and kind of do my little end thing. In this Triggered by Trumpism series, asking the question, what have you started that's badass? And Men4Choice and the Call Bullshit campaign and, total badass. I love it. But I am very seriously considering starting my own kind of, political interest group around the economy of motherhood and connecting reproductive justice and economic justice and racial justice and but really engaging moms in particular and how we vote. Because often we vote because we just vote the way our fathers voted, or we vote the way our husbands vote because we let them be the people who know things and we won't explore our living.
You know things. You know things.
So it was really interesting to talk with you, and I'll have to connect with you outside of here more for maybe some guidance, on if, how, all of those things. But I'm going to end this here with saying goodbye to you and thanking you so very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Such great, powerful information. I love, that I love everything you do because I share almost everything you do.
You do.
And I've taken to sharing it with the Men4Choice preamble and branding because I think it's so powerful for people to understand where it came from.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for having me. It's good to connect face to face. And do feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to talk about fleshing out that idea a little bit more.
I sure will. And I thank you again, Oren. Thank you for joining Open Studio with Kim Jorgensen Gane for episode 4 of my Triggered by Trumpism series. What have you started that's badass? And everyone have a wonderful Friday.
Stay safe, folks.
You take care.
Bye.